There is a version of this story that begins with success, with a Lekki studio, a waiting list, and a name people know. That version is true, but it is not the whole truth, and the whole truth is the part that matters. The whole truth begins in Ajegunle, in a one-room apartment that held 6 people and one dream that nobody had named yet. It begins with a 9-year-old girl watching her mother iron a dress she had spent 3 days making for someone else, pressing every crease out carefully, the way you treat something that does not belong to you. The girl watched her mother's hands and thought something she could not yet put into words. She just knew she wanted to make something with her own 2 hands and keep the feeling of finishing it forever. Her name was Adaeze. She did not ask for permission to start sewing. She borrowed a needle from the neighbor, took thread from the tin her mother kept on the windowsill, and cut an old piece of Ankara that nobody had claimed in months. She was making a school bag. It was uneven and badly stitched, and the handle sat too high on one side. She wore it to school anyway. It fell apart in 2 weeks. She did not cry. She sat down and sewed it again. Some people are built for starting over. Adaeze never saw it as starting over. She saw it as continuing. She made it to Polytechnic. Her mother had ironed 7 dresses for other people's children before she could pay the school fees for her own. That is a weight Adaeze has never forgotten. The weight of someone else's sacrifice folded into every thread she would ever sew. She left in her 2nd year, not because she was failing. She left because every hour she spent in a classroom felt like an hour she was spending away from the things she already knew she was meant to do. She had tried to explain this to her mother. Her mother did not speak to her for 3 months. Her auntie said what aunties say. They said she was wasting herself. They said she was too proud. They said she would come back begging. They said all of this from the comfort of their own compromises. But Adaeze did not say that out loud. Her father was a quiet man who repaired generators in a yard at the end of their street. He had calluses on both hands and a face that had learned not to show too much. When Adaeze told him what she had decided, he sat with it for a long moment. Then he stood up, went to the back of the room, and came back with 2,000 naira folded once. He put it in her hand. He looked away. She understood that he was not looking away because he was ashamed of her. He was looking away so she would not see that he was not. She used the money to buy 1 yard of lace. The long, quiet years. There are years in every life that do not look like anything from the outside. Years when nothing is announced. No celebration, no breakthrough, no moment you can point to and say, that is when it changed. These are usually the years that change everything. For Adaeze, those years looked like this: a stall at Balogo Market where she sold alterations for less than they were worth because she was still building a name, a shop in Surulere that was barely a shop, a small room she shared access to with a printing business, and a woman who sold human hair. The roof leaked, the generator was shared, sometimes the light went out halfway through a seam, and she would finish it by the torch on her phone, squinting, the phone balanced on a stool beside her. She ate eba more nights than she can count. She can laugh about it now. Back then, there was nothing to laugh about. There was only the work and the belief that the work was worth something, even when no one was paying her enough to prove it. Every dress she finished was a quiet argument she was having with the world, a proof she was running. She finished the dress, therefore she could. Therefore, she would keep going. Customers came and went. Some were kind, some were not. There was a woman who collected a gown Adaeze had spent 4 nights on, a beaded neckline, hand-stitched, some of the finest work she had done at that point in her life, and said it was not what she had imagined, and walked out without paying. Adaeze stood at the door of the shop for a full minute after she left. Then she went back inside and threaded the needle. That is not a metaphor. That is what happened. She went back inside and she threaded the needle and she began the next thing. The dress that changed everything.
Nobody tells you what the turning point will look like before it arrives. If they did, you would probably not believe them. You would expect something grand, a powerful client, a major event, a moment that announces itself. For Adaeze, it was a copper. A young woman newly posted to Lagos who needed an Asoebi dress in 5 days for a wedding she had not planned to attend until the last minute. She had called the big ateliers, they were booked. She had tried 3 others, they either didn't respond or quoted prices she couldn't afford. Someone, a cousin of a friend of a classmate, the kind of connection you can never trace clearly, gave Adaeze's number. Adaeze picked up. She always picked up. She stayed up the first night cutting the fabric. She stayed up the second night doing the beadwork on the sleeves, which the girl had not even asked for, but which Adaeze decided the dress needed. On the morning of the 5th day, she delivered it wrapped in tissue paper she couldn't really afford. The girl put it on. She looked at herself in the mirror for a long time. Then she looked at Adaeze. She said, "Who taught you to sew like this?" Adaeze said, "Nobody." The girl posted photos from the wedding. Her friends reposted them. A stylist who worked with a well-known artist saw the dress in her timeline and went looking for the tag. She found it. She sent a DM at 11:47 on a Tuesday night asking if Adaeze was available for a shoot in 2 weeks. Adaeze replied in 4 minutes. She said yes. She rearranged everything in her schedule to make it true. What they see and what they don't. When the magazine came to photograph the new studio, the one in Lekki now, right and clean, with a proper cutting table and 3 apprentices and bolts of fabric lined up along the wall, they asked Adaeze what the turning point was. She smiled. She told them about the copper. She told them about the DM. She told them about the shoot that led to other shoots and the word of mouth that built slowly like water finding its level until one day she realized the enquiries were coming to her instead of her going looking for them. She did not tell them about the Surulere shop. She did not tell them about the nights without light. She did not tell them about the woman who walked out without paying, or about the time she sat on the floor and cried until she was empty, or about the calls she didn't make to her mother because she didn't want her mother to hear the uncertainty in her voice. She kept those things. They were hers. She had paid for them in full. Success has a public face, but it has a private history, and the private history is always the longer story. Adaeze's mother came to the studio opening. She stood in the doorway for a moment before she came in, looking at the space as though she was making sure it was real. Then she walked to the wall where Adaeze had hung 3 of her favorite pieces, a burnt orange wedding gown, a heavily embroidered agbada, a simple white dress that took her 12 hours and looked like it had taken none. And she stood in front of them without saying anything for a long time. When she turned around, her eyes were full, but she held it together like mothers do. She said, "Your father would have liked this." Adaeze said, "I know, Mama, I know." That is the version of the story she doesn't tell the magazines either. Not because it is painful, though it is, but because some moments are not made for an audience. They are made for the people in them and the silence around them and the years of work that made them possible. Hard work doesn't always look like hustle. It doesn't always look like sleepless nights and borrowed needles and a stall in Balogo in the rain. Sometimes it looks like a woman standing in front of her daughter's work and not needing to say what she is feeling because the work says it for her. That is what Adaeze makes when she sits down to sew. Not just garments, not just beauty. She makes proof.